Welcome to On the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens for episode 150 of On the Verge. We've been doing this show since early 2020. We've now reached the 150 milestone. And this is a show that will be fun for a lot of reasons. We pre-recorded an interview with Eve Rosenbaum, the Orioles Assistant General Manager of Baseball Operations, earlier this evening. Those of you who are members of our Patreon community have exclusive access to that right now. The audio version of that interview. And for the rest of our audience, you will see that as part of the regular recording of this show when it is released late tonight. And in case you haven't signed up for our Patreon community yet, think about doing so now. For as little as $3 a month, you could join our community. We have an active WhatsApp chat full of other Orioles fans following the minor leagues. And at the $5 and $10 levels each month, you'll have access to bonus daily content throughout the season, plus exclusive first access interviews, like the one we did with Eve Rosenbaum today, and a lot more. And on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Bob to welcome the 3 new members to our Patreon community.
Yeah, thank you to Sam, Cam, and Eric for joining us. 2 at the AA level, 1 at the single A. We'll get you up to AAA before the end of the year, and happy to have you on board.
Absolutely, and thank you to all members of our Patreon community. We'll get into what has been an active first full week of games at the minor league level. The Orioles low A, high A, and double A affiliates, the Delmarva Shorebirds, Aberdeen Ironbirds, and Bowie Bay Sox, began their regular seasons last week. And all 3 teams have provided highlights along the way, from Jackson Holliday getting off to a really hot start at Delmarva to Chase McDermott dominating on the mound so far for the Bowie Bay Sox. He continued that on Wednesday. He is now up to 9 straight scoreless innings to start this season with 12 strikeouts against just 4 walks. Those 2 players just kind of scratching the surface, though. We also saw the Norfolk Tides defeat the Gwinnett Stripers 21-2 on Saturday, reflecting what has been a hot start for Norfolk's lineup. And Nick, I'll start with you here. Now that we're more than a week into having the full slate of minor league affiliates play, what have your impressions been so far?
That the bats are extremely hot overall. Pitching, I think there are going to be a couple of surprises. I'm loving what Chase McDermott is doing. He's up to 9 scoreless innings now because he just wrapped up 5 more scoreless innings tonight as we're recording this. And then some of the guys in Delmarva. I know we'll talk about more about Delmarva guys, but I think Delmarva as a whole, we heard a lot about how they were so young, and the elimination of short season ball, you're going to see a lot of guys repeat that level. And you're seeing a lot of those guys like Creed Willems and some other guys who are repeating Delmarva again. I think they're doing exactly what the organization was hoping they would do right out of the gates. So it's a good sign to see. Good first couple of days.
Yeah, it's been pure bliss. First of all, I want to thank Major League Baseball for adding the minors to the MLB app, the At-Bat app. It's been amazing to have these games up on the TV, easier access on the phone. When I went through the minor league app last year, I feel like I had to re-log in every single time I wanted to watch a game. So that's been nice, smooth, and it's just been amazing to watch these guys. You're still missing some guys from our top 50, top 100 for me that I'd love to see get out there, like Michel Desaune and all. But God, it doesn't matter which game you put on, you're going to have something to watch out for, and it's been fun to watch. Joey Ortiz highlighting AAA, Creed Willems in low A, Jackson Holliday. You got Beavers and Fabian and Kobe Mayo and Heston Kjerstad. It's like no matter which game you're watching, you got something to get you excited about the future. It's been fun.
I'll start off with Holliday, last year's number 1 overall pick. He entered Wednesday night's action, which was 4 games for him so far, doing what Jackson Holliday does, which is walking more than he strikes out. A walk rate just under 16% with a strikeout rate at 10.5%, which for a in low A is excellent. But he's checking off another big development mark here, which he is hitting the ball in the air a lot more, line drive rate of 35.7%, and a fly ball rate of 21.4%. We had noted that Holliday did hit the ball on the ground a lot after he was initially drafted by the Orioles. And if you go back and you watch clips of him hit over the weekend at Salem, what he showed was a pure line drive oriented approach to all fields. And you look at him and you realize that this probably only scratches the surface of what he could do offensively because he's so young, has room to add strength, and he's got the kind of swing that should allow for him to hit for more power as he starts to fill out.
Yeah, he won't be in Delmarva long. I would imagine by May 1st, he's up in Aberdeen. I mean, he just looks like clearly just the most polished professional hitter that that I've seen from any of the games that I've watched. And he's super young still, so 19 years old. I can't see leaving him there that much longer. Aberdeen will be a challenge for the hitting environment, but the approach is golden. I don't think there's any worries about that. So I say get him up to Aberdeen by May 1st, and let's see what he can do.
He's taking some massive swings too. He's swung and missed on a few that, I mean, he's swinging for 450 feet on these balls. He's coming up, bases juiced, or a couple of guys in scoring position. I think he's just sitting fastball right down the center of the plate because he's facing these 18-year-old inexperienced kids when he's a kid himself, but the guy was in major league camp for an extended period of time. But he's clearly looking like fastball, middle, and just I'm swinging for the fence on this first one. That power is going to come. I've seen a lot of comments already. People like, yeah, a lot of ground balls. Looks like a spray hitter. He's not. Like, the power is there. He's got 3 doubles already through 4 or 5 games. I think he had an RBI base hit or an RBI double just a couple of minutes ago before we hopped on. He's swinging the bat extremely well and still doing what he does. He's walking more than he's striking out. Great eye there at the plate. I've been most impressed defensively. He's played a lot of shortstop. I think he had 1 game at second base, but just him and Carter Young turned a smooth double play the other night. A couple of diving balls. He had that one at second base. Great hop, showed off the hops a little bit last night, last out of the game. Defensively, he is really showing out, which I think for a lot of guys, that's something that I'm paying attention to a little bit more already because we know a lot of these guys can hit the ball. We know what their bats are about. So I've been watching the defense a lot more, and Holiday he's really impressive in all facets of the game right now.
Yeah, it's a good point about the defense. Smooth is the word, and it seems like he's just got that timing down where it's like he knows how much time he's got in the internal clock. Like he just gets him by like a foot or a step every single time, and he's got a gun over there. And I wonder if the time in the major league camp could help with something like that. But it's been fun to watch on both sides of the ball with him.
Yeah, let's talk about his teammate in the middle of that order, Samuel Basayo. I think we all were excited to see what Basayo could do with Delmarva, but maybe tempering the expectations a little bit because of how young he is and the fact that catcher is such a challenging position. But he hit some bombs at Salem over the weekend that I don't know if they've come down yet.
Man, and talk about smooth on defense. I mean, he did play some first base too, but behind the plate, man, he looks really comfortable, just really relaxed. He does have a cannon for an arm, but he was blocking balls. I thought he looked really good behind the plate, and obviously, yeah, expectations, they can't be low anymore after the start he had because, man, he hits the ball with authority at 18 years old, right? He's still only 18?
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable. I mean, he's got real man strength already. I can't imagine what he's going to be like at 21, 22 years old. Yeah, Vivek Yordan Alvarez behind the plate. Yeah, even better than Yordan. I'm calling it right now. No, it's been fun to watch. It's just nice to see that one of these international signings seems like they're really going to be one of these pop-up guys and maybe have a real impact and make a top 100 list. Could be the first.
Yeah, we're not at Felix Bautista level here, but he's listed at 6'3", 180. I don't think that's accurate at all on his player page. We're going to have to get some accurate measurements on Sammy Basayo soon. Yeah, 2 home runs back-to-back games to begin the year. That swing is going to do damage from the left side of the plate. I loved watching him play first base. He had a beautiful stretch. He is nimble and athletic for a big catcher like that. A perfect stretch on a ball. A couple of balls in the dirt, he was able to scoop them out. I mean, usually I'm used to, you watch those Delmarva games and, they can be, even with the pitch clock, some of those Delmarva games can be 4.5 hours, a lot of runs, a lot of errors. The defense down at Delmarva has been I think the best at any of the 4 levels, to be completely honest, right now through their first 4 or 5 games. And Basayo is a huge part of that. My expectations were really tempered because I was afraid we're going to sit here and watch like a lot of strikeouts, maybe a couple of home runs, but those first 2 games, like you see it, and you see other outlets like national outlets, like he's going to be a top 100 guy soon. So it is national hype now, and he's living up to it. And it was, it's fun to finally have eyes on him because we've heard about him for so long. I feel like at this point, and he's 18. I'm trying to look at his birthday here real quick. He turns 19 August 13th, so he's still got a couple more months of being 18 years old. He already has 13 home runs in his professional career. That's kind of absurd.
Yeah, and his teammate Anderson De Los Santos might be the one where we have to temper expectations a little bit. I mean, I like his approach at the plate. He hits the ball hard. We know that. He hasn't had the fastest start, but I do like that he's taken some walks. He looks really solid. So I think he's a guy that might be on a more traditional development curve than Basayo, who's like just spiked straight to the hype meter.
So we are going to recognize more players later on in the show, of course, in our final segment, including Samuel Basayo's fellow catcher at Delmarva, Creed Willems. I'm not going to, hold that one back. We're going to talk about Creed later on in this show. But as far as the top tier guys, really looking maybe at our top 30, maybe even more narrowly, I'd say our top 15. What has maybe stood out to you? And I'll start with Nick on this one.
Just overall in the system?
Yeah, overall in the system or any individual player.
I mean, let me pull up my thing here. I want to move. Do we want to talk about AA? I mean, there's so many of these guys up here in AA. Skip around a little bit here. Heston Kjerstad, I mean, playing a lot of first base, which is really cool to see. We kind of talked about that, and I've seen that thrown around, but it was kind of like maybe 2-3 years down the road, right? Mountcastle, we figured what out that situation's all about in a couple of years, whatever. When Kjerstad's major league ready, we can have that conversation then, or just Kjerstad be your backup first baseman, but primarily an outfielder at the major league level, whatever. Like years from now, opening day he was playing first base for the Bowie Bay Sox. So cool to see 2 home runs already, a couple more base hits, couple walks. I'm really liking what I see from Heston Kjerstad, like power to dead center. He's not missing a single beat from the AFL to spring training and now to AA Bowie. It's his, you saw a lot of talk in spring training, people like, I don't know, could Heston Kjerstad, and not Orioles folks, but like national folks saying like, could Heston Kjerstad be like knocking on the door of the major leagues by the end of the year? And I kind of like wave that off. Like there's no way. But now you look at what he's doing. It's like, how long is he going to be in AA before he gets that bump up to AAA? And then what happens? But could not be more excited for Heston Kjerstad from everything that he's gone through already.
Yeah, it's exactly what we wanted to see after a nice, successful spring training. You wanted to see them carry that over, and he did that immediately. And he's hitting for power. He's taking walks. Yeah, love to see him at first base. You got to get that versatility. And I don't know, Ryan Mountcastle's making a statement like maybe he might be the starting first baseman for quite some time in Baltimore, but you never know. They're always looking for that left-handed backup first baseman to have on the roster. But Bowie might not have like the deepest roster when it comes to prospects, but that top 4 or 5 of Kjerstad, Kobe Mayo, he looks great offensively, defensively. John Rhodes looks good. I feel like nice to see him healthy back in there. And Cesar Prieto, man, added the power. He was like 0 for 6 in game 1, and it's like, oh, of course, he's going to be the one that doesn't get a hit. But then he's been on fire ever since, hit a home run, multiple hit games left and right. And even Dante Williams, I feel like, has been fun so far. So Billy's been good to watch. The pitching's been really strong as well.
Yeah, I think for Kjerstad, getting that time at first base is really helpful for him. And I've never been in the camp that thought that Kjerstad absolutely has to move out of the outfield. I think he plays right field fine. There's nothing that I really see wrong with him as a major league outfielder, especially if he does settle in at right field. But at the same time, we know now, and this is something we're going to talk about a little bit later on in this show, and something that Eve Rosenbaum talked about during her appearance earlier, which is that the difference between playing left field and right field now at Camden Yards is pretty big. So if Kjerstad can play first base, that only helps his case for getting to the major leagues, even if you do have Ryan Mountcastle there, because you're going to have to move around to get at bats. There might be time for the Orioles feel like Kjerstad is not their best defensive option in right field, especially if they're on the road, but they want to keep his bat in the lineup, so he's playing first base. So this only helps his case for getting to the major leagues, even if I've never thought that he's an inherently bad outfielder. I just don't, he's not necessarily going to be an elite right fielder. So if you can put in that skill set of playing first base, it helps him out a lot.
Yeah, we'll see what this outfield situation looks like in Bowie. I'm excited for Dante. You mentioned Dante Williams too. I think he's been hit in the hand twice already this season. So hopefully he can stay healthy. I think Kobe Mayo's also been hit in the hand twice. So I don't know why these guys are gunning for our Bowie players, but yeah, Kershaw looks good. You mentioned Cesar Prieto. Like, props to him. I mean, I don't know. Maybe Cesar, are you listening to the podcast? Me calling you out. Bat goes hitless. I mean, he was the lone bat in Bowie opening night that was like, okay. He was like 0 for 5 with a strikeout. 3 hit nights the next 2 nights. And then his home run was that Tuesday night, I think. His home run was probably the most beautiful home run of the minor league season so far for any Orioles prospect, if not the top, like one of the top 2, top 3 so far. I don't know where that power came from. I still don't know like what the exit velo or what the distance was on that home run, but it was a shot. Man's hitting 444. I don't know what the future holds for Cesar Prieto, but he is coming out of the gates. Honestly, he's one of the hottest hitters in the entire system to begin the year.
Yeah, you've heard of Mr. October. This is Mr. April, because remember, he started off pretty strong with Aberdeen last year, too. Hopefully he can carry this on a little bit longer.
Yeah, he definitely looks stronger this year, and I think he's doing what he needs to do, which is hit the ball harder. I think we had kind of heard some things that underlying data with Prieto was not great last year. So you combine that with the fact he didn't take a lot of walks, and he looks like a very atypical Orioles offensive prospect. Now you're starting to see the power come along, and I think that helps him out immensely for the future. I do want to shift to Norfolk for a minute. I know we're going to talk more about the Tides later on in the show, but 21 runs in one game against Gwinnett.
No home runs, right?
Yeah, no home runs, which, I have seen a lot of bad minor league games over the years. I've seen a lot of high-scoring minor league games, but if you get 21 runs in a game, props to you. I mean, that's 3 touchdowns and 3 extra point attempts. So, the lineup right now does look really good. Jordan Westburg, we know, is hitting the ball hard. Joey Ortiz, as we talked about earlier, is hitting the ball hard. Connor Norby has looked good to this point. So, for the most part, the guys that you want to have success are doing it right now for the Tides.
And Hudson Haskin, don't forget about him. I mean, he's hitting bombs. He's playing good defense. And he's getting hit by the pitch more than anyone in history since Brett Cumberland. So shouts out for that. But I just can't get over the fact that Joey Ortiz is like consistently hitting the ball well over 100 miles per hour. He had 114 mile per hour exit velocity at some point, and that's like elite. He had a couple of 108s, a 106, 107. So that's really cool to see, because he's a guy that he doesn't walk a ton, but he doesn't strike out a lot either. Makes good contact and hard contact, and obviously we know the glove. So I think his ceiling might be raised a little bit more than we might have already thought. So that's been like my standout at Norfolk anyway. And yeah, Westburg, it seems like every single game he hits the ball 106 exactly. So pretty awesome to see. You got these reinforcements, and now look, Kyle Stowers down there in AAA too. The lineup just got better, so watch out, AAA pitching. Ryan O'Hearn, Josh Lester, the sluggers of the century, and Lewin Diaz has been awesome too. So even the guys that it's like, these are your major league veterans, these are your 4A guys that are just there in case of emergency, they're performing too. Maverick Hanley, great start to his season as well. Looks very capable at the AAA level, so he's only maybe 5 months, a year away from making his major league debut as well.
Yeah, this Norfolk roster, without a doubt, the best Norfolk roster we've seen in many, many, many years. I like Westburg is just routinely, like you mentioned, the exit velos every single day. You look at like the top exit velos in that Norfolk game, and Jordan Westburg has at least 1, if not 2, batted balls there. Connor Norby, actually, I don't know if you guys caught this, and I just looked at the box score for the game that's going on right now. He's not in the lineup tonight, and I think he was originally scheduled to be in the lineup yesterday, but was scratched, I believe. Haven't heard anything about Connor Norby, but he started the year on an 8-game hitting streak with a pair of home runs. Like, he's striking out 11 times in those 8 games, just 2 walks, but He's still hitting 343 with a pair of home runs and at least one hit in his first 8 games. So hopefully, I don't know why he's been scratched the last 2 nights, but hopefully everything's okay there. I don't remember seeing anything with him. Hudson Haskins I did not know what to expect from Hudson Haskins, to be completely honest. He's been that guy that's always flown under the radar, but it was like, is that bat going to hold up at AAA? Like, is he going to get to AAA and start to like falter a little bit? And he's holding his own. I mean, he's hitting over 300 in AAA, a home run, double, triple. He's doing it all. You mentioned that getting hit by a pitch, OPS around 1,000. He's having a fantastic season to begin the year, playing good defense as well. And the standout for me is Maverick Hanley, just because I've been saying the bat is for real. The bat took a big jump last year in Bowie. It wasn't just he's playing in Bowie and offenses helped out in Bowie a little bit. That wasn't the case. I mean, strikeouts were way down, walks stayed the same. It was legitimate gains for Maverick Hanley, and he's proven it because he's doing it at the AAA level now. 7 hits in 6 games, 480 on base percentage, more walks and strikeouts. I mean, just takes guys a little bit longer, especially catchers. It takes a little bit longer for that offense to show up, and we know he's put in the work at Driveline the last 2-3 years. I'm loving what I'm seeing out of Maverick Hanley so far to begin the year.
Yeah, completely agree. And before we move on from Norfolk, I got to shout out what Drew Rom did on Tuesday night in Nashville, delivering 6 shutout innings, limiting the Sounds to just 1 walk. We know that Rom struggled with his command a little bit when he got to AAA last year. So if he can get to that formula that has worked for him in the past, which is work, efficiently in terms of his pitch count, get the ground balls, don't walk a lot of guys, he could put himself in the conversation for at least some spot starts in the major leagues by the second half. I am going to go down to Aberdeen real quick, which is Dylan Beavers. Hit his first regular season home run tonight. As Bob pointed out to me before we went on the air, that is not his first professional home run because Beavers did homer in the South Atlantic League playoffs last year. But it's the first time he's hit a regular season home run since being drafted out of Cal last year. The swing has looked good to this point, and the results offensively have been there. So now he's got that first regular season home run under his belt. It was a shot down the right field line at Hudson Valley. So I think now you can start seeing, all right, is he going to tap into the home run power before he, hopefully gets to Bowie later this summer?
Yeah, Aberdeen, Beavers has definitely been a hot start early on for this Aberdeen lineup. Pair hits last night, the home run today. That was good to see. That home run swing, it's just like he's chopping down a tree. That home run swing looked like he's just going at it. Who was that? Fangraphs that talked about like Sammy Basayo and his Paul Bunyan-like hacks. Dylan Beavers, I think, has the Paul Bunyan-like hacks. He takes a literal axe almost to that baseball. That's good to see from him. The rest of this Aberdeen team, I don't know. It's been tough these first couple of games. Like the defense is really shaky from some guys. Frederick Ben-Cosme is looking pretty smooth at the plate. I think he's the balls are going to start falling for Frederick Ben-Cosme. I think the way he's swinging the bat for sure. Judge Fabian looks really good. Max Wagner started out 0 for 15. I don't know what he's done tonight. That's rough to see. He's not striking out though, so he's putting the ball in play. That's a good sign. If you're looking at 0 for 15, at least he's putting the ball in play. And on the pitching side of things for Aberdeen, I don't really know what Aberdeen's rotation is because we've seen Daniel Lloyd start tonight. Alex Pham started the other night. A lot of these guys who have been relievers in college and relievers the last 2-3 years in the Orioles system. Yeah, like they're using all these relievers as starters in Aberdeen, other than Trace Bright, who we'll talk about later on. But it's like a patchwork kind of rotation there. I don't know. Yeah, but there's some breakout guys that are going to come from, especially from the bats in Aberdeen. And I think hopefully Dylan Beavers' home run there, that shot is kind of the spark plug for the rest of the lineup here.
Yeah, Max Wagner, that's not what we wanted to see to start the year. I mean, could just be the Rylan Bannon karma, BABIP karma there, getting him a little bit. But, man, I was hoping he would be kind of a guy that just kind of broke out a little bit this year, and there's still obviously plenty of time for him to do that, but a little bit of a slow start. Kyle Vervitsky also got lit up. I was not loving watching that. And Antonio Velez looks like he hasn't changed much since last year.
Yeah, I was excited when I saw Verbitsky come in. I was like, "Who is this guy?" And then the broadcast said it was Verbitsky, and he gives up 6 runs in 2 innings, and is just hanging every breaking ball he throws right over the plate, and 90-mile-an-hour fastballs over the heart of the plate. Not good, but I don't think he's on our list. So like, this is your chance, Bob. Gene Pinto did look good. I mean, as much as we can see from an Aberdeen broadcast, I'm going to take that shot every time I can because I hate watching this broadcast. But 6 strikeouts in 4 1/3 innings, 1 run. Gene Pinto looked good.
Yeah, he's back. Not like he ever left. I mean, and he's repeating the level high A. I don't think he'll be there too long. I wouldn't imagine. So yeah, he looked really good. Seemed like velocity was there. A little more consistent last year. It's one start, but let's just see if he can string together a couple in a row. Then maybe he's in Double A before too long.
Yeah, the key for him is going to be keep the walks down because that's probably the reason. That's probably one of the reasons why he's not in Bowie right now is that he would have those stretches at Aberdeen last year where he would just have outings where the command would get away from him a little bit. It looks like maybe sometimes we've talked about this before. He's a very efficient, very quick pitcher. There were sometimes you wish he would take a deep breath and slow down a little bit, especially when he was trying to pump the fastball by guys. If he can control that a little bit this year and get the walks down, I think we'll probably see him be really the first pitcher out of that Aberdeen staff promoted.
Yeah, I don't looking. See if I can pull it there. Yeah, I mean Fetterman, Ryan Long, Trace Bright just got there. Pham, Jake Lyons. Yeah, I don't really see any. Ignacio Feliz. I mean, he was fine. Nothing spectacular there. I think this Aberdeen staff and the bats at Aberdeen are here to stay for a while, except maybe Beavers and Fabian. But everyone else, this Aberdeen team, that's the thing. Some guys who got promoted from Delmarva, so this is their first taste of high A ball. We've seen so many guys last year come out of the gate struggling, and not just because like, oh, it's Aberdeen, so like that's an easy excuse to say that home ballpark suppresses the offense. Give it time. This Aberdeen roster is also very young and is going to take some adjustment just because they're moving to high A. So like for the diehards, the sickos, I think Aberdeen is definitely the team to watch early on this year because this is where you're going to see, I think, some of the most development, though, to put a positive spin on Aberdeen's early start to the year because there are some big name guys, a lot of top 30 prospects, but guys are just going to need some extra time, I think.
And they're going to get some reinforcements with Jackson Holliday before too long.
Yeah, he'll just inject everything into that lineup when he gets called up.
Completely agree. We'll move up to the major leagues now. We'll talk about some news that happened over the weekend when the Orioles optioned Kyle Stowers to AAA Norfolk. This came as a corresponding move when James McCann was activated off the IL. Stowers' time in the major leagues has been quite interesting. If you exclude his brief debut cameo at Toronto last June, when I think he was actually a member of the taxi squad, Stowers has had a total of 96 plate appearances in 35 major league games since last August. And I don't think this is the end of the road for Stowers and probably not the end of the road for him here in Baltimore. It does come as a little bit of disappointment, I think, for people who were hoping that he could be a guy that could settle in and click this year. The Orioles ultimately going in a different direction, though. For now, they're carrying 3 catchers on their 26-man roster with McCann, Adley Rutzman, and Anthony Bemboom. We don't know how long that's going to last, and we don't know that even if Bemboom is moved sometime in the next couple of weeks, that it's an automatic that Stowers is going to come back. So, Bob, kind of digesting this situation for a minute, Stowers is now going to go back to Norfolk, where he's going to get everyday playing time after not getting much playing time at all in the major leagues since last August. What are your thoughts on this situation? Is this the Orioles simply not being able to find room for him? Is it putting more confidence in other players on the roster over Stowers? Is there more than what meets the eye in terms of his development? What do you think is going on here?
I had a couple thoughts about this. For me, it was like, if he's not going to play, and clearly he just wasn't going to get the playing time. You saw even Vavra get some starts over him in the outfield. If he's not going to play, apparently Brandon Hyde does not believe in reverse splits. But if he's not going to play, get him some everyday at bats in AAA. Just keep him sharp. If there's an injury, he'll be up. He'll get more playing time. I don't think it's like the team is soured on him. I just think it's, you got Austin Hayes, Cedric Mullins, Santander. It's like Eve was telling us earlier in the show, like, you got a lot of solid outfielders, and clearly they like McKenna for what he provides running wise and defensively, despite a drop ball in Boston. They cost us the season. No. I just think also based off of Eve's comments that it is a little bit, he still needs to get adjusted defensively. I think until he can really get adjusted to those three-tiered stadiums and the bright lights and the crowds, I think he's going to be strictly in the old Santander role of whichever of left and right field is the easier to play. They'll put him there. It doesn't seem like they're super high on him defensively at the major league level at this point. So I think it's just, I keep coming back to Kyle Tucker with the 2018-2019 Astros, had 900 plate appearances in AAA combined those years with an OPS well over 900. And it was like, what's it going to take? What's it going to take? What's it going to take? And then now he's been a mainstay of their lineup for quite some time. So I don't think anything is necessarily gone as far as Stowers' potential, even with the Orioles or with another team. I think it's just you're waiting for the opportunity to get him in there, and then he's just got to capitalize once he gets it.
I'm glad we had a couple of days to kind of cool off a little bit and think about it. This is why I don't like the hot takes and just like jumping on Twitter or jumping behind the mic of the podcast and going off about things. But I also didn't listen to Eve's comments yet. I was unable to make the interview, and I think that's the one show that I wish I would not have been able to miss, being able to interview Eve Rosenbaum. But so I don't know what she said yet, but my thoughts, without hearing what she had to say, my thoughts with Stowers is like, I take a little bit of a different approach. And maybe it's because I'm souring a little bit, but I get that like playing time is tough, right? It's early season issues aside, you want Cedric Mullins and Anthony Santander in your lineup every day. Austin Hayes is going to be in there. I also don't think, like, as much as I would love for this to be the case, I don't think it's as easy as is the scenario we kind of talked about this offseason where you move Santander to like primarily first base DH with the occasional start in the outfield, maybe on days when like Adley isn't behind the plate and he's your DH. I think James McCann showed you Tuesday night why he's not going to be an everyday guy, but why I think the Orioles do want his bat in the lineup a good amount of time. I think he was hitting cleanup tonight for tonight's game. I just think, where does that leave Stowers at this point? He's kind of pushed out. And I know McKenna has continued to fall out of favor with Orioles fans, myself included, but while Stowers, defense, say what you will about it, maybe it's better than, some people give him credit for it, maybe it's not. But at the end of the day, if you're looking like 1v1, Ryan McKenna's defense is better than Kyle Stowers. He's more athletic. He's got more range. He can play in those bigger ballparks. If you need him in left field out at Camden Yards, if you need him in a bigger, if Cedric Mullins isn't in the field, McKenna can cover that ground in center field for you. That's your guy. So I guess I kind of cooled off a little bit. Like I said, if it's riding the bench versus 4 at-bats every night at Norfolk, I get it. So if there is, an injury or somebody is massively struggling and suddenly, they're hurt, quote unquote, and maybe they're that phantom IL stint, Stowers comes up, he takes the spot. He's not been cold on the bench. He's been facing live pitching every single night. He can step in. But also, I almost wonder if kind of an alternate viewpoint of Bob's there, not Kyle Tucker, but the opposite end of that is saying, like, what if the organization just views him as this second tier type prospect? And like, yeah, he's a good hitter. Yes, he's made a ton of improvements in AAA. I've read off the stats 100 times by now, but he still falls into like that next tier where we see the walks, we see the on base, we get excited, that massive raw power, get excited about that. You watch Ryan McKenna play and want to pull your teeth out. But at the same time, like, the Orioles are maybe just happy with having Stowers be depth. I don't know.
I definitely think that one of the things that hurt Stowers is that the Orioles right now are not going with the set DH. I think they want Adley Rutschman's bat in the lineup as much as they can get it in there, which means that Anthony Santander is going to be in the outfield more often than what I think some of us would like. And I think that on nights where Rutschman is behind the plate, you've got that opportunity to put McCann in against lefties. You've got the opportunity to, give Austin Hayes or Cedric Mullins a rest and put them at that DH spot. regardless of how things are going to play out there, I think for the time being and maybe for the rest of the year, the Orioles are not going to have a set DH. Whereas I think the three of us had kind of hoped they might move Santander in that role. They just don't want to do that yet. And if I can understand it in one way, if you want to maximize Adley's plate appearances, because he is the most complete hitter on this team, and it's clear the lineup is better with him in it than it is without him in it. That's good with me. Now, as for where I think the organization sees Stowers, I think that one of the challenges now is going to be, can you look at him as a guy that you can rotate between both corners? And I almost question, watching Austin Hayes this year, if the best solution for this team for the rest of this year and possibly for next year is to go out and find a guy who can play left field at Camden Yards and move Austin Hayes to right, because his arm is going to play well there. He has struggled, I think, to adjust to the expanded dimensions at Camden Yards. But most nights, when you factor in his offense and his defense, he is your best option to put out there. But I just think that defensively, he fits in right field better now. So where does that leave Stowers? He may have to go down to Norfolk and play left field every single night to convince the Orioles that he's ready for that challenge. It might be that this opens an opportunity for Colton Cowser or Hudson Haskin. It's going to be a really interesting situation to watch. But in the back of my mind now, I'm just wondering if Hayes can continue to sustain his success offensively. I love the swing adjustments that he's made. He's hitting the ball hard. Is your best move to put him in right field? Then you've got to find a new left fielder. And it's not going to be Ryan McKenna. We know that. Ryan McKenna is going to be out there on an alternate basis. So what is your next option? And I won't rule out Stowers yet, but I think it falls in that thinking.
Yeah, Cowser, Haskin, if Stowers could get it together, yeah. It's a good point, though. It's a really good point because Austin Hayes is like at the very bottom of all defensive metrics for outfielders, and it has kind of shown, I'm not going to lie, he's looked really bad out there as far as range goes and reading balls. Clearly, he's got a cannon. So, yeah, he could be the new Santander. And, yeah, you got to find a guy that can cover that ground in the new left field.
I don't know where all this fits, where all these guys shakes out. I just know, like, you know, they're not going to ship McKenna off or send him down to AAA. I don't even know if he has options yet, DFA and what. They're not going to get rid of McKenna to put Stowers on the major league roster. Like I've seen a lot of people say, that's knowing how this organization operates, knowing what they value. That's not going to be the case. So, you know, I think honestly, I'm kind of just at this point with Kyle Stowers. Like the thing that bugs me, this is the point that I don't think I mentioned earlier. The only part that just irks me, and I'm going to take a shot at every single time, just acknowledge the fact that he can hit a lefty. Like, that's all I'm asking for. I don't care if you keep him down at AAA. I don't care if you view him as, you know, a backup, you know, 4A type guy. I don't care. Just acknowledge the fact that the guy mashes lefties, and don't use that excuse anymore. But the playing time thing is legitimate. And like I mentioned, maybe it's just, you know, Stowers. We see the power. We see the good numbers. I mean, the guy hit 27 home runs in 2021 across 3 levels. He hit 19 home runs, 29 doubles last year in AAA. The guy's put up monster numbers across his minor league career. But maybe he's just, you know, maybe he's not that guy. And if this is like Keston Kjerstad, if he continues this hot stretch and like Kjerstad's getting this treatment, I'm getting more upset because I think Kjerstad's a much better prospect, has a bigger potential, higher ceiling. But Stowers maybe just doesn't have that. I don't know. Or maybe it's just not his time yet. I wish we had more definitive answers, but
I do wonder if Westberg is ready to come up and they decide to do that, maybe Vavra and or Adam Frazier can maybe cover enough ground in left field. I know Vavra played some center field in AAA, so did Stowers. Frazier played some outfield as well, so maybe that's another option until Cowser or Haskin is proven to be ready to give a shot. But it's definitely a hole that I didn't foresee coming into the season.
I'll jump in on the platoon splits thing. The minor league to major league correlation of platoon splits is something I've always been kind of skeptical of. Like, I remember there were years that DJ Stewart hit lefties as well or better than he hit righties in the minor leagues. And that didn't happen in the major leagues. Now, he couldn't hit major league pitching. So that was a separate problem onto itself. But I've always been a little skeptical that because someone hits lefties in the minors, they're going to do it in the majors. But Stowers didn't really get the opportunity to show us one way or the other. If he had had a good sample size of plate appearances against left-handed hitters and had struggled, I would be sitting here telling you right now, those platoon splits probably don't mean anything. He hasn't faced really tough major league breaking balls from the left side. He hasn't faced really good lefty fastballs. They're exposing weaknesses that minor league pitchers couldn't expose. Yet he didn't get that opportunity. So it's still very much a question of what would make them think that he couldn't hit left-handers unless there was some other reason he just wasn't in the lineup that night.
It's a good point, and it could be something that, I mean, clearly they know more than we do just looking at stuff. But I'm pulling this up because I think it's kind of funny. He was 1 for 2 with 2 hit by pitch and 1 home run against lefties in the 4 plate appearances that he got last year. So 500 batting average, 2,750 OPS. So small sample, he's crushing them. He had 94 plate appearances against righties and had a 670 OPS.
Yeah, I guess that's the other part of this too. It's just why it's frustrating. It's like, why put him on the opening day roster, and
Franchi Cordero was right there.
but just like not give him that opportunity. Like that's the only thing that bothers me, I guess. Why aren't you giving him regular at bats? And I've seen the comments too. It's like, well, Stowers just doesn't look good at the plate. He's never had an opportunity in the major leagues to get consistent at bats. That's my only issue. Just acknowledge the fact that he can hit lefties, and you don't need to send him down just for that reason, and give him an opportunity, right? Other than that, it's like, go down to AAA, keep doing what you're doing. He's been doing that for 2 years. So like, what's the real reason here? And if it's playing time, that's fine. Like, this is a roster crunch situation where it's only going to get worse if these guys continue to perform. And I'm just glad we're having this question, like this debate right now. And this is discussion we're having, like, why isn't Kyle Stowers getting playing time when, 2 years ago, the top reserve outfielder in AAA was like Mason Williams. I mean, like, it's huge, but yeah, it is frustrating for Stowers, and I guess we'll see how all this plays out. But yeah, I guess in the words of Braden High, just keep doing what you're doing down there, Kyle.
Do either one of you view the prospects, or at least the chances of some of the prospects getting major league time, differently in light of the Stowers situation? So in other words, does it maybe temper your expectations for what we could see in the major leagues from a guy like Jordan Westberg or Joey Ortiz or Colton Cowser if he can work his way in that conversation later this year?
For me, I mean, this all started with Jahmai Jones. Like, let's be honest. No, like, it's player by player is differently. Jordan Westberg, I'm not as concerned about, to be completely honest, just because he's playing left field now. So maybe this is his final step. We saw Gunnar play first base before he got moved up. Maybe the move to the outfield for Westberg is his final step. And honestly, like, how does the organization view Vavra? So if it's Vavra or Westberg for that spot, Westberg's a much better defender across the board. Huge bat. As much as I love Taron Vavra, Jordan Westberg's bat is extremely good. Crushes the ball. I think they would put Westberg over Vavra, and then you see him get moved. But anybody else, it's player by player basis. But Westberg, I feel the least of a potential like Kyle Stowers situation popping up.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I feel like there's a line, and clearly it's just player by player dependent, like Nick said. And there just seems to be like a caliber. Like Westberg, I think if he's up, he's going to play, maybe not every day. He's not an Adley, he's not a Gunner. But majority of the time he's going to play. Joey Ortiz, I think the same. I think the organization's higher on him than a lot of fans are. Norby, same thing. Kerstad, same. Maybe there's really no one in between, but Hudson Haskin is a guy that could come up and be the Ryan McKenna. Like, if McKenna got hurt, maybe Haskin comes up and they're fine just playing him once or twice a week, defensive replacement, pinch runner, and it's no big deal. Clearly, Stowers and Vavra were right there, and this is an organization. Wow, cannot speak. This is an organization that thinks and believes that players can develop whether they're playing every day or not. They're still practicing, they're still doing drills and stuff. So I think it's player dependent, but they're not going to bring up a top 5 prospect and sit them on the bench, I wouldn't think, but 10 and under, maybe.
We're going to talk about a different left-handed hitting outfielder now. As our listeners, if you're new to the show, you may not have heard about this yet. We have a new segment that is released each weekend called Major League Mailbag, where we take questions from our followers, members of our Patreon community, generally focused around the major leagues, but prospect questions, of course, are accepted. Nick hosted Major League Mailbag this past weekend, and he got an interesting question from a follower on Twitter that he decided to table. He decided to table until tonight because he wanted it to be a segment on this show rather than an answer in the mailbag. So, Nick, can you read off the question for us?
Yeah, let's pull it up here. I thought this was a good one for all of us to get together and talk about after his start. It says this from Orioles feed on Twitter. Shout out to you. Can you guys explain Colton Cowser to me? He was supposed to be a left-handed hit tool, on-base machine in the mold of Nick Markakis, but suddenly he has become a 3 true outcomes player, more in the mold of, dare I say, he who must not be named, hits long bombs, but yeah, Chris Davis. I'm not saying he can't still be a great player with that skill set, but he's kind of a befuddling player who's a lot more risky than the safe player he was touted as when he was drafted. So what do you guys think? Also, and I'll throw this out there before you guys answer this first. He is, I just pulled this up because I'm looking at everything. He is 2 for 3 tonight with an RBI triple. Just throwing that out there.
It's interesting, right? Because, yeah, for Delmarva, we said it looked like Little League out there. He's just putting the ball wherever he wanted. But clearly, he went into that offseason trying to gain strength and power. And I think he proved that he did that. I mean, he had a lot of extra base hits, a lot of home runs, doubles. And, yeah, he struck out more than you would want him to. And he has, I'm not sure of strikeout rate so far this year. But, I mean, it's a guy that came from a small school, so it's almost like in between a polished like SEC college player draftee and a high school draftee. It's like an in between. He's growing, and I think with the added power, maybe the organization has decided that it's worth it for him to lean into that. And clearly, no matter what, he's got great plate discipline. He's going to take his walks. His on base percentage is going to be good. Kind of like we're seeing with Gunnar right now. He's batting like 120, but he leads the team in walks. So if you're going to slump, you might as well walk. And, hey, lean in on the power. Be that 3 true outcome guy. That's fine if you're getting on base 35, 40% of the time, hitting some bombs, playing a good center field, which would probably lead to an excellent left field. Could be that guy that Eve wants, that second center fielder out in left field in Camden Yards. So I don't think he's a finished product yet. I think he's still developing. He might be that Kyle Tucker that gets a bunch of AAA at-bats just to really hone his skills. We might not see him full-time in Baltimore until 2024. And that's okay. Not every prospect has to race to the majors and take over right away. These guys have, development's not linear, and maybe he's just one of the guys that's going to take a little bit longer, but I think it's going to be worth it. I think the raw skills are there for him to be a well above average major league regular.
It's interesting because this time last year was when we started hearing from listeners about the quote unquote Colton Cowser problem, because he was striking out so much at Aberdeen. And if you looked purely at his slash line, his average on-base percentage and slugging percentage at Norfolk right now, you would think that the same problems he had at Aberdeen to start last year are back in play, and that's actually not the case. His strikeout rate right now is at 27.5%, which is a little high for a guy who is not hitting for power. But in about the same amount of plate appearances, he had 40 plate appearances entering Wednesday night's game. In 41 plate appearances, through 41 plate appearances at Aberdeen last year, he had a strikeout rate of 41%. His problem, I think, so far this year is that he's hitting the ball on the ground a lot more than you're used to seeing him hit the ball on the ground. One silver lining in all of this is that he's hitting the ball hard. He had a 96.3 mile per hour ground out against Nashville on Tuesday night. In that 21-2 slugfest on Saturday, he was really the only guy in Norfolk's lineup that didn't have a good game. And yet he had a 100-mile-an-hour ground out. So he's hitting the ball hard. He just, maybe it's his timing is off. Maybe there's something with his swing, but I look at that, okay, he's still doing what he's to do. He's hit the ball hard. He just isn't driving it the way that he should right now. The strikeout total is a little high given his production, but given that it did drop pretty exponentially at Aberdeen before he was promoted to Bowie, it leaves you with hope that he's going to get that number down and find a way to make these other adjustments. So maybe by June, this conversation is a little bit different because maybe the power hasn't fully come along yet in terms of home runs, but he is driving the ball more, hitting line drives and fly balls more often, still hitting the ball hard, and the strikeout rate, maybe somewhere around 25%. And I think at that rate, you feel better about his profile than you would right now.
I think the conversation changes next week because he's got 4 hits the last 2 nights with I think no strikeouts. But yeah, I still think Cowser is that like quote unquote safe option. And we kind of touched on this when like the top 100 lists were coming out, and we saw Cowser fall, especially on lists like Fangraphs, which ranks guys based on future value and their ceiling. Right? Cowser, I just don't think has that ceiling comparatively speaking to a lot of other guys. And it's still a ceiling of an everyday major leaguer, but like he's not hitting 40 home runs when he comes up to the big leagues. And he doesn't have that, insane carrying tool that's going to lead him up and cause him to break out or whatever. And if you think he's not a true center fielder, just ignore the bat right now together. If you don't think he's a true center fielder, then yeah, if everything else is constant, you're going to knock him down a couple of pegs on your top 100 list. So I think that's that issue there. But I'm not a hitting coach, so like I can't really sit here and say like point out anything of what's going on. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see in the next 2 weeks a piece of the Baltimore Banner from John Mioli, like a discussion with Brink Ambler, and they touch on what Colton Cowser is working on the last couple of weeks to get more insight into this. But I would just say like don't be so quick to dismiss what Cowser did last year. Like the combined on base percentage of over 400. Even though he struggled in Aberdeen, he had a WRC plus of 123. He had a 184 WRC plus in AA. And in AAA, the batting average was, pull up these splits again. The batting average was 079 in his first 10 AAA games last year. 22 strikeouts, 5 walks. It was ugly. But then he ended the year 17 games. He hit 317, was held hitless in just 3 of those games, reached base in 16 of those 17 games. So like, maybe he is trying to tap into more power. Maybe he's working through an adjustments. Maybe he's just someone who takes longer to settle in. Like, I don't know, but he's proven at every level that he can hit and he can be successful. So like my assessment of him isn't changing right now in April. He seems to be turning things around already. I still think this guy is a bona fide major league starter somewhere.
And it's literally been 2 weeks. So, I mean, it's still so early. It's such a small sample size. And like you said, he just could be a guy that, Ryan Mountcastle has had some rough Aprils in 2021 and 2022. And until this year, seems to be getting off to a fast start. But, yeah, I mean, strikeout rate, it's supposed to stabilize after around 60 plate appearances. And we're 2/3 of the way there. So let's see. In another week, at the end, after this week, we'll have a better idea of the strikeout rate. Obviously, it can still fluctuate, but already much better than last year. Seems to be a guy that is just going to learn from playing time and just experiencing it. And I have no doubts that we'll see him have some pretty awesome games. And like Nick said, by this time next week, it could just not be a discussion. I still do not think Colton Cowser is a problem. Case closed.
Yeah, I mean, the strikeouts, again, yeah, like you mentioned, these numbers aren't stabilized or anything yet. It's still way too early. It's 8 games, but I mean, he's not striking out more than he did last year when he was in AAA. It's down a little bit, and he's walking more. There's a 12.5% walk rate coming into tonight, and that strikeout rate after tonight is going to go down even more. And also, like he's got a 208 BABIP. So, I mean, Zach mentioned how hard he's hitting the ball, which he is starting to hit the ball a lot harder. You're seeing higher exit velos in some of these more recent games, by hitting the ball on the ground, he's just not getting it through. And you saw that last night, or was that Tuesday night? I don't know what day it is. I think it was Tuesday night, the first game of the series. You saw like some of that classic Colton Cowser swing where it was like on the outer half of the plate, and he just pokes the bat out there and just dumps it into left field right over the third base shortstop area. Like that to me is classic Colton Cowser, where he's seeing the ball well. He's not going to do too much. Just deposit the baseball where they ain't. Hit it where they ain't. That's what he does. Maybe it started something because he's got his last couple of at bats have looked a lot better. So I just think he's a slow starter. I don't know. Maybe he just doesn't like the Norfolk weather. I don't know what it is, but maybe something about playing on the water there in Norfolk he just doesn't like. I don't know, but give him some time.
So we'll go to a question here from Dental Office because this is something that has been brought up about Cowser, was his concern over his platoon splits. Dental Office wants to know how he's hitting left-handers this year. He's only had 6 plate appearances against left-handers coming into Wednesday night's game, and that was despite pretty much playing every day and leading off when he's in the lineup. So we really don't have a sample size right now, or enough of a sample size to tell us good or bad how he's hitting against lefties. We'll probably, maybe by the end of the month, we can start to figure that out, but it's kind of interesting because he hasn't seen a lot of lefties so far, and it hasn't been because the Tides are burying him. And I will say this, I like the fact that the Orioles are sticking him in that leadoff spot, or that, somehow through the combination of Buck Britton and the Orioles, they're sticking him in that leadoff spot, because there are some interesting leadoff hitter attributes with Cowser. You mentioned the on-base percentage being over 400 last year. He gives you a little bit of power, and I think at a time right now where the Orioles are really having to figure out, is the leadoff position really set with Cedric Mullins, or is it more of a mix and match type thing where we're going to see Mullins there some nights, Austin Hayes there some nights, maybe Gunnar Henderson once he starts getting, consistent production at the plate. Maybe Cowser, if he shows he can stick at that spot in the lineup against AAA pitching, eventually gets that shot in the major leagues.
And I'd say, what if he is? I think we talked about this with John Mioli last time he was on. What if he gets to the major leagues and he does just play the strong side of that platoon in the major leagues? Okay, fine. I don't have a problem with that. I know some people would say that's a failure. He's a first round draft pick. The bar was so high, but I'd say good. I mean, he's a mid-major college bat that you developed into a major leaguer who's hitting on the strong side of a platoon. And I don't know if maybe this plays a role in it too. I was thinking about this earlier when my thoughts about Cowser. Maybe some people's expectations of Cowser just up here because of what he did at Bowie and what he did that first year after he was being drafted. Maybe some people's expectations are just way up here, and they see some of the struggles and it's hit the panic button a little bit. And my expectations are still high, but they're down here a little bit. And so that's why I feel confident in what Cowser is doing. I've said this before. I don't think he's a future, 8-time All-Star in the big leagues, but I think he's a solid guy who's going to play a whole lot of games in the major league at the top of a lineup, get on base at an extremely high clip, steal bases, play good defense, and be above average major leaguer.
Yeah, I mean, strong side of a platoon, that's still 450, 500 plate appearances in a season. So nothing to sneeze at. And I think he's a prototypical leadoff guy. I mean, he's going to take pitches. He's going to make the pitcher work. He's going to get his walks. He's got some pop as well. So, yeah, I think he's much more of a guy you want at the top of the lineup more than Cedric Mullins, who only walks 7 to 9% of the time and strikes out a little more often. So, yeah, I mean, it's just Colton Cowser will forever be a topic of discussion, I feel as long as he's in the organization.
Yeah, that started the day he was drafted. People were like, what the heck? Because it was all right, this is the height, I feel of you're saving money, you're being cheap in the draft. And it's well, you're not being cheap. You're still spending the same amount of money. You're just spreading it around. But some people don't understand that. But yeah, I think because of that, Cowser is always going to be a hot topic. And he's always going to have to be that elite player or people are going to question him, unfortunately. But dude seems like one of the genuine bros dudes on that team. He was so much fun. I love that the Orioles highlighted him a lot this spring training to kind of lighten the mood a little bit. But that's another reason why I'm not worried about Colton Cowser yet.
Yeah, as I said on an episode a while ago, until Colton Cowser gives me a reason to doubt him, I'm not going to doubt him. And we'll slide in now to our final segment. And this is the first, and we've got the full slate of affiliates for this weekend or for this segment, which is we recognize a guy outside of our top 30 prospect rankings or within the top 30 of our top 50 rankings who has done something we want to recognize, whether it's a good game, a good week, something interesting in their stat line that we think is being overlooked. And I'm going to start with Bob because Bob has two pitchers, but he has a hitter who we sort of alluded to earlier in the night as a guy who is off to an excellent start. And I think we're actually going to want to spend a little bit of time talking about here.
First of all, we need a sponsor for this segment so we can actually have a name for it. So anybody out there who wants to do that, please reach out because it's just easier than saying the final segment. You know what it is and then explain it. My hitter is Creed Willems. Obviously, we've been beating around this bush for a little bit. He came into this season looking to be in much better shape. I mean, he's still a bigger guy, but he's a little more lean, a little more muscular, I would say, and he's shown that at least with the bat so far. Before today, anyway, he was 7 for 11 with 2 doubles and 2 home runs, 4 walks as well. Love to see that. Working well behind the plate. Maybe it's his breakout season. He's still only 19 years old. Anyone that gave up on him last year just because he was an 18-year-old with a little bit of extra weight on him, shame on you because he's here, and him and Basayo make one of the most fun catching tandems you'll ever see in low A ball.
Yeah, Creed. Oh man, the shot he had, his first home run was a line drive, laser beam down there in Delmarva. He's got the thing that has impressed me the most with Creed Willems. It's only 3 games. I get that, but still, we're gonna have fun with these small sample sizes. 4 walks to 1 strikeout blows my mind. Creed Willems has struck out 1 time in this first 3 games. He struck out like 28, 29% of the time last year. Did not walk at all, like single-digit strikeout rate. And now he's got more walks and strikeouts through his first couple of games. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, you're seeing a lot of guys in that Delmarva roster. It looks pretty familiar if you watched a lot of Delmarva last year. And the organization was hoping these guys would take the next step this year. And Creed seems like he's doing that. Some of the other bats seem like they're doing that as well. But my man's got a 401 WRC plus right now. I'm just going to highlight that. Again, fun with these small sample size numbers.
Absolutely. And, to the extent that it is a small sample size, it's worth noting we really started to see signs of a breakout from Willems late last year. He really turned the corner after the beginning of August at the plate. So I thought that he would definitely fare better against low A pitching this time around. But the fact that he's gotten off to this hot of a start is encouraging. And, so far what's been good to see is that both he and Basayo are getting a decent amount of reps behind the plate. So he's going to continue to showcase what I think he does well, which is call a good game, work well with the pitching staff. He's got a nice arm behind the plate. So things definitely looking up for Creed Willems. And we'll go to Bob's pitchers now.
Yeah, first I just wanted to shout out Cesar Alvarez because what he did was pitch, and he didn't do much of that last year. So it just was kind of a happy surprise to see him in the box score and see him get into a game for Delmarva. I think he's a guy with a lot of potential still. But really, my guy is Bradley Bramer, just another pitcher from last year's draft, 11th round, I want to say. And he didn't pitch at the end of last season. So this was like the first chance he got to go out there as an Oriole and show what he can do. And we got to watch him and thought he looked pretty good. Solid 4 innings, no runs, struck out 2 batters. So interested to see what he does this year. And, some of these guys are going to pop that we don't really hear much of or know much of before their first full season. So maybe Bramer is one of them, maybe not, but it was cool to see him get out there and pitch. And it was also cool to see Graham fire a vet if I get that third pitcher out there, scoreless inning with 2 strikeouts.
I like him. Shout out to Delmarva too. Gave us a center field camera for some of his Bremer's outing there, and Reese Sharp's second outing, who could be a little bit more sharp in his outings. But my guys, I'm going with the bat. I'm going with Elio Prado. Just want to shout him out. I called him on my little Substack thing there, where I'm just like jotting down my notes or thoughts or whatever when I have supposed to be working and I'm not. I called him like Mr. Copy Pasta legend because it was 2019 we traded Andrew Kashner for Elio Prado and Noel Berth Romero. 2019, and he's still in Delmarva. But like injuries have just derailed his career up to this point. He did not strike out in the opening series. I think he did strike out like 3 times since then, but he didn't strike out in the opening series. Couple walks, hit a home run, so he's already tied last year's home run total. He hit 1 home run last year in 66 games for Delmarva. Already got that. He looks he's smaller, compact, just comfortable at the plate. I don't know how high his ceiling is. If he's going to be a breakout guy, I don't really know, but he's only 21. So as long as he stays healthy, he can get back on track and be in high A, I imagine, fairly early on. And then Daniel Fetterman, I think we touched on him earlier. Undrafted last year, 2021, undrafted in 2021 out of Miami. I mean, pitched well in 2021, college guy in rookie ball. You expect that. But last year was a combined 0-9 with a 5.58 ERA. But it was just god-awful numbers in Delmarva. When he got promoted to Aberdeen, despite having an ERA of almost 7, he put up a 4.20 ERA, 39 strikeouts to 6 walks. Earlier this week, or last week, he pitched 4 innings, allowed just 1 run on 3 hits, no walks, 8 strikeouts. Huge opening outing for him. Coming off the World Baseball Classic performance, he pitched a clean inning for Israel against the major leaguers. That was cool to see. So, again, I thought Fetterman 2022 early on with Delmarva, that was the end of the road for him, but the guy's a strikeout machine for Aberdeen. So good to see from an undrafted guy.
Those are good picks. I'm sticking entirely with Aberdeen for my picks this week. And on the hitting side, I got to shout out Isaac Bellany, who through his first 3 games of the season picked up a home run, has an OPS of over 1,700 right now. Again, a small sample size, but it's an encouraging start for a guy who I think has to make the most of every opportunity he can get this year. While he's fairly young at 21 years old, he did struggle when he got the opportunities in Aberdeen last year. He hit really well at Delmarva, but struggled at Aberdeen in 169 plate appearances, putting up an OPS of 559. And Aberdeen also has a really stacked starting outfield to begin this season with Reed Trimble, Judd Fabian, and Dylan Beaver. So Bellany, so far, making the most of the opportunities he gets and maybe showing that this adjustment period to high A pitching is going to result in him hitting a little bit more like he did at Delmarva last year. And then my pitcher, Trace Bright, had an unbelievable start on Saturday against Wilmington. Struck out 10 batters against his 2 walks and 3 1/3 innings pitched, allowing 3 unearned runs on 1 hit. And throwing 66 pitches in that game, which is not bad considering you're striking out 10 guys along the way. Bright is a guy that I look at as someone who could really break out based on the underlying traits that we've heard about his pitch mix. There is a risk profile there, and it may not work out, but I think he's much more interesting and much better than what his pure numbers at Auburn last year suggested. So I'm really anxious to see what he does on the mound this year, and his first start of the season was certainly a good way to get things going.
Yeah, this was the obvious breakout candidate, right, on the pitching side from the draft picks of last year. Not sure the 27 K per 9 rate is sustainable, but we'll see. Clearly the stuff is good enough to dominate and get some whiffs at this level. So I'm very interested. I was already super interested in Trace Bright's season, but now you had my attention. Now you have my curiosity, whatever that line is.
Yeah, this could be a really good example of, people always dock this organization for you don't draft pitching. You wait so late to draft pitching. I think this organization just feels confident in being able to take guys with the traits they like, that they've identified, that they want in all their pitchers. They take the same guys over and over and over again, and they're just developing this massive pool of, the Justin Armbrusters, the Noah Denoyers, hoping maybe 1 or 2 really do pop. But otherwise, that's going to lead to a whole nother podcast episode in itself. But with Bright, I've even seen someone, I can't remember who said this. I was reading something they were writing. Can't remember off the top of my head anymore, but he suggested Trace Bright could be a guy that you see in the major leagues in less than 2 years as a reliever and just a dominant arm, bullpen arm for the Orioles. So First start though, high A, 10 strikeouts, not too shabby.
Speaking
As
of
we mentioned at the
Denoyer
top
and
of the
Watson
show.
and those guys off to good starts as well. Armbruster.
Yeah, absolutely. As we mentioned at the top of the show, this is our 150th episode. Bob, Nick, before we wrap up tonight, any thoughts on that as we've now hit 150 episodes?
Age is just a number. Here's to 150 more.
I can't believe we're at 150. It's just like every single week. It's like some weeks it's like, what are we going to talk about? And those weeks where it's like, I don't know what we're going to do, guys. Those seem to be our best episodes. I feel like it always works out. So yeah, just thank you to everybody who listens. The numbers are amazing. I love it. Love all the support, all the patrons. This is a lot of fun. And now we've got actual baseball to talk about. It's after a long winter, it's going to get even more fun.
Yeah, and thank you to Eve Rosenbaum for coming on tonight's show. She was an excellent guest. If you haven't heard that already, we will be putting that out with the full episode later on Wednesday night. Thank you to all of our listeners who have been here since day one, and to the listeners who are just coming on board. We hope you stick around because we've got 150 more and even more beyond that episodes in the works here. So also a special thank you over to the people over at Baltimore Sports and Life, owner Chris Stoner, and Dr. Stephen Loftus, our draft guru. Don't want to leave him out of this, even though he's with the Atlanta Braves now. It hasn't been on the show in a while. We always know that his draft coverage was what brought a lot of people to the show in the first place, and a lot of them stuck around. So thank you to him. And while you're on, and also to a lot of our loyal guests that have been on the show multiple times over the years. And between now and our show next week, be sure to head over to BaltimoreSportsAndLife.com where you can get all the latest coverage on the Orioles, the now Odell Beckham Ravens, but maybe Lamar Jackson, maybe not. We'll see. And much more. And while you're there, be sure to hop on the Best Sport and join the discussion with fellow readers of the site as well as contributors. And be sure to follow us on Twitter at BSL and the Verge and check us out on Instagram and Facebook. We will have plenty of highlights for you on those channels between now and our show next week, which will be back at its normal time on Monday night at 8 o'clock. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to On the Verge.